Good afternoon, everyone. Rather, I should also say good morning if you're joining from other parts of Canada. And welcome to Cyber Pulse, which is usually a webinar. But today we are going to have a panel discussion on account of Stop Cyberbullying Day, which is tomorrow. So the title of today's discussion is Likes, Lies, and Lives at Stake: the real cost of cyberbullying. As you all might already know that cyberbullying is very persistent. It's anonymous. It's often invisible to people who are at the victim end of it. It just doesn't harm your reputation. It can have an impact on your mental health, on your financial health, and in some cases, it can even put your lives at stake as well. So that's why we brought together a panel of experts today who would share their insights on this topic from a policy point of view, from a point of view of their experience, their research. But before we dive into today's panel discussion, just a couple of notes. Today's session would be recorded, and the Q&A would be live throughout the conversation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A session so that we have an interactive session today, and we'll try to take as many questions as possible at the end of the panel discussion. And with this, I come to the most important part of today's panel discussion. I welcome all three of our panelists on account of Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity, Ryan, Ashna, and Shannon. Welcome to the panel discussion. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Maybe we can start with quick introductions, and if I can start in alphabetical order from Ashna. Ashna, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you can start from you.
No, it's all good. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashna Ali. I am the Leadership Development Facilitator at the Dais. We are a public policy and leadership think tank based out of Toronto Metropolitan University. My role primarily focuses on working on our Screen Break initiative, which was recently rolled out in late November. The Screen Break program primarily focuses on responding to the phone restriction policies that have been, or personal device restrictions that have been rolled out in every province across Canada. And my focus area is on youth engagement and supporting young people and shaping what these policies look like moving forward.
Ryan?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Ryan Broll. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the University of Guelph in Ontario. I've been studying cyberbullying now for about 15 years, which is sad to say that it's possible it's been that long. Most of my early work focused on security related to cyberbullying, how various groups of adults respond to and prevent cyberbullying. More recently, I've begun focusing on resilience and how youth cope with negative experiences like this.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Shannon Waite. I teach at the University of New Brunswick across the faculties of family violence, criminology, and sociology. I specifically focus on cyber violence, sort of why it happens, who's responsible, who targets who, and why, and sort of how, as a society, we promote it without even realizing. So that's my main focus. I also work with a lot of first-line responders, being teachers, educators, people who are in shelters, RCMP, and sort of act like a liaison just to give an outside academic lens to what's happening. They're the front line. They see it every day, but I kind of assist them in recognizing maybe things that aren't directly, noticeable, like, hey, I'm experiencing this crime. So that's where my side goes.
Thank you all for the introduction. I can definitely say I'm the least experienced in person on today's discussion. But anyways, let's dive right into it. Let's begin by framing the issue around cyberbullying. We all know that the issue of cyberbullying is not new, but because of advent of technology and artificial intelligence, it has evolved dramatically. So let's try to understand what's the current terrain is from your unique lens, whether academic or community or policy. How would you describe the current state of cyberbullying, and what are some of the trends and patterns that concerns concerns you the most? Maybe we can start with Shannon, this time.
Sure. So the academic and social, they're vastly different, but they're also very similar when we look at this crime. So I often like to say to my students and stuff is that we kind of can't frame it as cyberbullying anymore. It's not simple bullying. It's not like when we think back to when we went to school, being picked on the playground. What's happening now is actually criminal in nature. Like we should reframe the cyberbullying into what it actually is. It's cyber violence. It is criminal. It has to be taken serious. So from my point of view, looking at it from an academic lens, of course, stats are something that we depend on, and I want you to be cognizant that the stats are a little behind because we're not going to get day to day, and to also recognize that it's only a quick snapshot. In this, when I say stats, it's only what's been reported and categorized as cyber violence, meaning if it's not reported, we're not going to catch it, and if it's not categorized as cyber violence, it's not going to fall under this umbrella. So depending on who takes the statement and such. So just to give an idea of how prevalent it is, some of the results from early 2024, they indicate that we had over 2,300 hate crimes reported to the police in the first 6 months only. For context, to show how this crime has grown, this number is essentially half of what was reported last year. So it's essentially doubled. These hate crimes, specifically 48% of them are targeting race. So that's their main target, followed by religion at 29%, and then sexual orientation at 31%. And that can encompass gender, sexual preferences, the whole bit. They also indicate that there's been over 41,000 cyber crimes that were reported from January to June 2024. These are certain violations that we have on the books and have sort of text to back them up. So identity theft and identity fraud comes in at 56% of this number. When we look at extortion, we're looking at 6%, and that can be sexualized. It can be any sort of extortion. Child pornography come in at 16%. And then we have the very last, the harassing, the threatening behaviors, which include criminal harassment, indecent or harassing exposure, communications, uttering threats. And this accounted for 14. So that's quite a bit when we're looking at that number. Anyone can experience cyber violence, of course, but it is estimated that women are highly targeted, more so than men and boys. Not only do women experience this crime more, it seems to affect their lives more. It's more impactful on many different levels, as you said, jobs, personal, that sort of thing. In fact, 18% of women in the Canadian provinces have experienced unwanted sexual harassment or behaviors just from being online, dating sites, Facebook. 33% of these women are between 15 and 24, 30% are Indigenous, 50% are bisexual, and then just a rough number is that 30% of all youth have experienced cyber violence in one form or another, and that's reported. They say that teenage boys are more likely to be the ones inflicting the cyber violence or the slut shaming or anything that encompasses that, coming in at about 87%. So it's sort of that way. And then I mentioned that it's mostly girls, but interestingly, since the pandemic, we're now seeing boys make up 53% of those that are being sexually exploited online, whether it be, sharing videos and then wanting money back, that sort of thing. So it's actually starting to shift that youth boys and young men, adults are. From a social lens, I guess, is what my other part of the question asked to discuss, is what society thinks it looks like. So everybody often thinks that if I protect myself, I keep my social media locked down, I don't share anything, I don't share pictures, I'm not ever going to be a victim. Never can be me. That is not true. Absolutely anybody can be a victim of this. We like to think in a just world or it's karma. So when we see somebody being victimized online, we think, why'd they share that picture? Why'd they talk to that person? Why'd they give that information? We're essentially blaming them and not the predator, and we're creating this atmosphere of accepting it. This person deserves this. They should have known better. So that's sort of what it looks like there. We all like to think it's never going to happen to us. Not true. The other thing about this crime is that if you put your phone away, you disconnect, what we often tell young children and youth, put your phone away, get off the social media, it'll stop. Again, that is not true. it can seep into what we call the real world. So loss of income, family stigma, friends not wanting to associate with you anymore for seeing stuff online. If you've been called a sexual predator, or if you've been called anything that I could, think of, an incel, or even an emoji that's been attached with your name that has a negative aspect to it. So that happens to them. So then that feeling being alone, having no one, in a worst case scenario, it happens a lot with the gaming. When they disconnect or they unengage, swatting can happen. So I'm going to get your attention. I still want you to know. For those who don't know, swatting is calling in a call to the police. That is as a dangerous call, abuse, something. So they respond, unfortunately, guns out, they're ready to go to the residence. And so that's sort of a umbrella of, how it affects us socially and academically.
Thank you, Shannon, for sharing those insights, and especially some of the data around cyberbullying. Ryan, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I think that's really important context. Thanks for sharing the statistics, Shannon. My focus is really on youth, elementary and high school students, specifically between about middle school, where we know that cyberbullying, any type of bullying, peaks, and then it tends to decline through high school. But as Shannon points out, that doesn't mean that other very serious forms of cyber victimization don't extend well into adulthood. And certainly cyberbullying as a slightly more innocuous form of violence than some of what Shannon described exists in adults as well. When we think about youth, I would describe the current digital landscape as very rapidly evolving. You mentioned this in the introduction, but I think we need to really think about the effects that things like AI will have on young people. I have a lot of concern about the rise of deepfakes and how that's going to perpetuate harms against young boys and especially young girls. And I mean, technology is just so saturated now. It's everywhere. There's very high online use amongst all of us, and young people are included in that. And we know that more time spent online correlates with a higher risk of cyberbullying victimization. But of course, the design of many apps, including really popular ones among young people, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, I mean, they're intended to keep us on them and keep us coming back regularly, right? The algorithms are meant to make us addicted to them, to encourage us to use them more. And so then when we have these apps that have these features built in, and then we spend more time on them, I do worry that we'll see increases in cyberbullying as we move forward, and as some of these stats begin to catch up. So I think I can leave it there. I think Shannon provided a really fantastic overview.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ryan. Ashna?
Yeah, I think both Shannon and Ryan touched on really important points, specifically on how insidious it is, and also just the piece about how fast things are moving, and also the design of the actual platforms. I think now I would say that young people are navigating a digital world. Like, I know we can focus on a lot of the negative pieces as well, but I also think obviously tech allows us for creativity, connection, community, but the harm piece is it's also full of harm, and oftentimes it's invisible. Bullying, specifically in the context of school, it doesn't stop when the school day ends anymore. It follows them home into their bedrooms and right into their sense of self. And I think it goes beyond name calling. It's things that are like anonymous harassment, impersonation, being flooded with toxic content. And it's not just person to person, it's very structural. Like Ryan was saying, platforms are designed to reward outrage and keep us engaged, not necessarily safe. At the Dais, we do like an online harm survey every year, and we've seen that youth in Canada, especially those who are aged 16 to 29, they've been reporting online harms at a much higher rates than the general population. So we're talking about exposure to hate speech, violent content, targeted harassment at levels that are 30 to 50% higher than average. So I wouldn't say that this is just like a bullying problem. It's about how digital spaces are built, about how we've built digital spaces that make harm easy and accountability hard. And we're expecting young people to navigate that on their own, while adults around them are also just scrambling to catch up.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Of course, some of the numbers around cyberbullying are really, really alarming, and algorithms are designed, are designed in a way that, people are hooked to these social media platforms. So we talked a bit about the current, landscape of cyberbullying on different online platforms. Now, if we talk a bit about responsibilities, educational institutes might they might feel that the digital platforms needs to do more. Digital platforms might feel that the policymakers needs to do more. And then the policymakers might feel that, okay, these digital platforms needs to have their product, designed around, safety rather than engagement. So whose responsibility is it, and where does the buck stop? Maybe, this time I can start with Ashna.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people still picture cyberbullying as someone sending a mean message or making a rude comment. And obviously that's a part of it, but it's obviously much more subtle and constant than that. It can look like being left out of group chats, getting anonymous DMs, seeing harmful content about yourself or people who look like you, getting amplified over and over and over again. And I wouldn't say that it's loud or dramatic. I think the most damaging stuff often flies under the radar, chips away at people over time, and it happens across platforms. There's like very little clarity around what's online and what's real life. I think another big misconception is that young people don't care or that they're just being careless online. What we've seen in our surveys is the opposite. Like, youth really want digital literacy. They're craving to have conversations about this. They want to be able to talk about it openly without being punished or dismissed or judged, or like just told to log off or get off their phones. They're basically just asking us to take them seriously.
Thanks for that, Ashna. Ryan, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, thanks. I think there are some important misconceptions, certainly around cyberbullying that exist. A few come to mind. I think there's still a misconception that cyberbullying is somehow less harmful than other forms of bullying. It's changing a little bit as millennials get older and have children of their own and whatnot. But amongst slightly older generations, there's a very clear divide between online and offline. But young people don't see that distinction at all. It's just their life. And so cyberbullying is as equally harmful as any other type of bullying. There's also a misperception or misconception that cyberbullying, and here I'm focusing again on youth, is anonymous. And it's often not. It's often the same people that are bullying kids on the playground that are bullying them online as well. Certainly, it can be anonymous, and especially when we think of things like bullying that happens on gaming platforms, this might be more common. But much of the cyberbullying that we see, the victim knows the perpetrator. And this was mentioned already, but I think it's worth repeating. Logging off and disconnecting does not stop cyberbullying. Parents often, and I can understand this, I'm a parent, if your child's being harmed, our instinct is often to take the source of that harm away. But that doesn't help in many cases. It can be harmful to youth to not have access to, I mean, we want to obviously limit technology, especially among younger kids, but amongst older amongst older people and teens, technology is how they socialize, it's how they connect, it's the modern day mall. And so taking away that access to technology can harm their friendships and relationships. So we have to be cautious with that. And we know that one of the reasons why many victims of cyberbullying don't tell anybody is because they're worried that they'll lose access to their technology. So we have to be careful with just following our instinct to remove that source of harm. So I think those are a few things that we need to consider.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Shannon?
Thanks, Ashna and Brian. All excellent points. So I'm going to pick up a little bit where Ashna sort of touched on. It's the victim blame. That's probably for me when I look at the change we need. Of course, we need tons of change. Platforms, governments. But I think if we really narrow it down, and as we say, we can't police and take phones away, but we have to teach youth and even young adults and even adults that these ideologies that we're fed every day, be it on the TV, social media platforms, what race is considered superior, what gender, what sexual orientation, how to dress, how to act. It's to have them to be able to recognize and see when someone like Miley Cyrus is being attacked, that's slut shaming. It's not against her. It's a slut shaming. It's the predator's fault. We need to educate sort of around this, because what essentially seems to happen online is, and I've been one just to read or, go down that rabbit hole of you read it, you see something online, you're like, oh, I can't wait to read the comments. Essentially, we dehumanize these people once they're on there. They don't become human anymore. They become the other. And when they become the other, it becomes easy to inflict hate speech, inflict hate. Mob mentality kicks in. It starts to gain momentum. We like to hope that Facebook and Instagram will pull these posts off quickly, but as we've seen, it can take days to look at. It can continue to spread. If it becomes popular enough, it's just going to take off. So I think a main thing we have to focus on is why these people are being attacked. So if youth and stuff can sort of identify that and see why, they can kind of think to themselves, like, they're being attacked for something that's really just silly. Like, they're not being attacked for really themselves. It's more of something that they have done or a difference that they perceive to have. And sort of how this stems, and to teach them when they're hearing things on the news, and to show them how it streamlines down. And I hate to bring them up, but when we look at Trump, I'll let you draw your own parallels there. For instance, my daughter goes to Leo Hayes. She come home saying boys were in the hallway saying, your body, my choice. So something that was on a political platform was taken by the youth out of context. They built their own idea around what was said, what was happening, what they heard, what they saw, and they started to essentially boys against girls. It created that divide. And once that divide started to happen, it became the mob mentality of all boys against girls. So I think it takes the youth to kind of recognize and step up and say, like, no, this isn't right. I'm not going along with this. If I can nip it in the head, we can stop a lot of that violence that happens, and a lot of that piggyback violence, that if a youth will check themselves and this can be real world, this is a real person, I think that's where we're going to see the most change when we look at laws or social media or ways to police and look at it, is to put that education into their hands. So what they're seeing, they're thinking about before they're acting.
Thank you for that, Shannon. That was really insightful as well. And again, I understand that cyberbullying is a very complex issue, and we can't solve it in one conversation. Maybe many such conversation needs to happen at different platform for us to address this. But from your perspective in the community, in the research areas, in the academia as well, if there is, let's say, one tangible solution that you guys can apply, it can be from an education point of view or a tech design point of view or law or culture, what would be that one change you guys would apply? And maybe I can start with Ryan this time.
Sure. I think there are certainly things that technology companies can do better, but I really believe that education is key here. And ideally that education begins in the early grades. There's some digital literacy and digital citizenship education in most provincial curriculums these days. But learning other things like empathy are important too for a variety of reasons. Schools spend a lot of time teaching students really important subject-based lessons, and understandably, that's their role. But they also teach young people how to become good citizens. And I'd love to see schools spend just a little bit more time on that piece, a little bit more time teaching relationship skills, healthy relationship skills. So things like, as I said, empathy, how to be a good friend, how to have difficult conversations, and so on. I think this type of relationship training has a lot of potential, not only to reduce cyberbullying, but also to reduce traditional bullying, and several of the things that Shannon just spoke about, and that Ashna's discussed as well. So I'd love to see more education on relationship skills.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Shannon?
Yeah, Ryan, all excellent points. And it's unfortunate when I hear if there's one change, my mind goes to, wow, to pick one change. I think it would have to be removing the stigma and shame of being a victim of this crime, especially where youth boys and young males are starting to become more sexually exploited online. To get rid of that stigma of, you're a man, you should have known better, or why is it bothering you, or why did you let it happen? If we could stop that, the stigma of actually essentially blaming the victim for what is happening to them, and actually put the blame where it belongs. It's on the predator. If we have enough people that begin to call out the predator instead of, why'd you take that picture? Why'd you share that picture? Why do you feel you had to do this? That's not right. So if we can shift the focus off of blaming the person who is under the attack to actually the person who's doing the attack, I think it's going to go a little bit further. I mean, we definitely need worldwide enforceable laws, but when you're looking at youth especially, nobody wants to be a target. And if we shift the target from it being the victim onto, all of a sudden we focus the target on the predator where it needs to go and the blame needs to go, and we start holding them accountable for what they're doing, I think we're going to see a decrease in that, because nobody wants to be called out. Right now, it's a victim against a number of people that have just jumped on. So if we could just shift that focus from the victim and have teachers not asking, why'd you do it? You shouldn't have done that. Instead, shift it to the person who did it. They shouldn't have done that. That is criminal, and call them out.
Ashna, anything you want to add here?
Not a lot. I think I agree with you, Ryan, that tech design isn't enough. I think investing in the people side of things is really important, especially in schools. I think having facilitating spaces where young people can talk about online harm, consent, boundaries, how to show up for each other digitally. I think a lot of times we're asking young people to navigate these broken systems alone, which obviously isn't fair. But I think if I was to speak a little bit about the tech side as well, I would say thinking more about tech from a public interest perspective, where platforms are built to prevent harm rather than just reacting to it. I heard a young person say that recently at a panel that I attended. They were talking about having more transparency around how content is shown, stronger protections against impersonation and anonymous abuse, and built-in tools for young people who are in distress, rather than just a report button that they could click on at the very end that's already buried.
Thank you for that, Ashna. We spoke a bit about the landscape as a solution. I think Shannon did pick up this part. So my next question is going to be about the digital literacy aspect of it. There's often two sort of thought points that don't give the gadgets to young people, and then there is another thought point that give them as much digital literacy as possible. So the next question would be, what role does digital literacy play, and how early should it begin? And maybe we can start with Shannon, this time.
I don't think there's any specific age when digital literacy should start. I get asked this question a lot. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and they often say to me, do you police her internet? Do you watch who she talks to? Do you take her phone? Do you sign on? And I think it's a family decision, and when they start seeing the responsibility of the youth. But I think before we put them on there, for example, my daughter has had an iPhone or an iPad that's connected since she's been 12. In our household, I don't hide from her. She's very not familiar with all the details, but she knows names like Amanda Todd, Jaden Bell. Those are youth that are her age. Like, I shouldn't shield her from what happened to them. She is 15, the same as Amanda Todd. If I can't educate her before allowing her to go on these platforms and to be aware of what is happening, then I'm doing a real disservice to her. Rather than saying no, I need her to realize it's wrong. So just little safety things. And I've heard her say them before, like to a girl, like, maybe you shouldn't send that picture, or maybe you shouldn't send your house. Like, that is your house number on it. Maybe you should think about maybe who you're talking to, not to tell them not to, but just to give them the equipment to realize that if somebody's approaching them in Roblox and asking, can we meet offside, or can we go to a different chat room, or how about you send me a picture, or where do you live, or let me buy you something. It's to give them that awareness to be safe online. And if they don't know the answer, to come ask somebody and to feel safe in asking their parent, like, this person asked me to go in a separate room. Instead of the parent being like, give me your phone, oh my gosh, can't believe that happened, is to sit down and explain to them, okay, well, this is what that means, and this is what can happen, and have that discussion with them. So as for age, I don't think there's any age. I have some friends and peers that their children still don't have a cell phone at 17. So yeah, I don't think there's an age. I think it's just making sure when they're on there, they know what's on there.
Ashna?
Yeah, so one part of like the Screen Break program or initiative is that we've been traveling across Canada and going province to province and speaking directly with teachers, principals, students, youth workers about how the policy is going, like how implementation has been so far. And one thing that always comes up when we get to the end of like solutions, obviously there's been a lot of obstacles in terms of how it actually looks like in practice. Digital literacy is always brought up as really important and a part of like should be a mandatory part of the curriculum, and really spending the time and resources on educating young people and also parents and like engaging them in the conversation as well on why we are doing this to begin with. At the Dais, we developed lesson plans actually for teachers. Like we co-developed lesson plans on deepfakes and misinformation for middle school and like the beginning of high school. And I think being able to see that in practice as well has been so effective, and like we've gotten such a good response from it. And students just want to be having those conversations.
Thank you, Ashna. Ryan, anything you want to add here?
That's fascinating. I don't have a lot to add. Digital literacy has to be age graded as well. How we monitor, a 10-year-old or 11-year-old on their phone or on social media is likely going to be different than how we monitor a 17-year-old on social media and on their phone. And the reason for that is because we want to have some oversight. We want to ensure our youth or our kids are safe, but we also want to build independent teens and young adults who can make good choices on their own. So I agree that it's a family decision. I agree that schools have an important role to play, just ensuring that those open lines of communication exist, that victims, if they are victimized, they feel comfortable telling somebody about what happened to them, whether that's a parent or a teacher or a coach or somebody else. We want to have those open lines of communication.
Thank you to all of you for sharing those insights and understand that maybe we can take another question before we move on to the Q&A session. Understand that there's a lot of victim shaming around cyberbullying. So if there's a victim of cyberbullying out there, what would be your sort of recommendation to them, that what should be the initial step they should be doing, because often there is a confusion that, should they be talking to their educational institute? Should they be talking to their parents? So what would be your recommendation on that aspect? Ryan, if I can start from, you this time.
Talk to somebody. Cyberbullying, all forms of bullying have power embedded within them. The bully in some way is picking on somebody that they see as weaker, and that power imbalance can be really difficult to overcome on one's own. But involving parents, involving teachers, whoever it may be, can help shift that balance of power to the victim's side. So I don't think it matters who somebody tells, but hopefully they feel comfortable telling somebody. Maybe it's a friend. Right? Like my work, as I mentioned, is focusing on resilience right now. Just having somebody in your corner, somebody that you can talk to, somebody that believes in you, that is so important in helping youth overcome these types of experiences. So there's no one individual. That being said, my research has certainly found that parents often become the strongest advocates for their children. They're often the central, I call it the cyberbullying security network. They're often the central sort of node in that network, and they're usually the ones that are bringing in the school, bringing in the police if needed. And they often are the person that a young person or a teenager feels most comfortable talking to after a friend. But tell somebody. Don't try to deal with it on your own.
Ashna?
I agree with you, Ryan, completely. I think it's just I think it really depends on the context of like where it happens. But I think it's important, obviously, to share and express. I think if we're talking about specifically the work that I'm doing of like we've basically in our program we've onboarded and recruited 20 students across Canada to like they're going through leadership development, learning about tech, learning about education policies, and then having the opportunity to shape what these policies look like moving forward. And I think even within that cohort, they've really been able to confide and find a safe space within each other. And I think in the fall, when they have the opportunity to facilitate peer-to-peer dialogue, that them having this knowledge now will really allow for further accountability in the future, but for young people to feel more safe to come forward with experiences like cyberbullying.
Thank you for that, Ashna. Shannon?
I fully agree with both. Just anybody. In saying this is where education and awareness comes back in, because the last thing we want to do is when the youth comes forward and tells somebody, to have that person essentially victim blame them or not take them serious or that sort of thing. Because once they become brave enough to tell, unfortunately, if they tell somebody who's not receptive or who's going to blame them or punish them, they're not going to tell anymore. So it's good to say, I hope they tell everybody, but in this sense, I think it's very important to have all first line responders know how to handle this or know who to pass it on to handle. For instance, it could be a nurse or a doctor, or, it could be anybody. It could be at a church. It could be, and just having that awareness out there, and hopefully the adult they go to becomes that safe adult. Because as I said, once they tell and that trust has been broken, or they feel they weren't taken seriously, then they're not going to tell, and it's going to continue, and they're going to try to deal with it on their own. And we all know sort of what happens when that occurs. So yeah, tell anybody, but hopefully we can create the awareness at the top to who they do tell is going to be receptive and help guide them in the right area and the right supports they need.
Thank you all of you for those insights. I think the central message here is that speak up, because a lot of times your bully is surviving on your silence. With this, we move to the last part of today's panel discussion. We still have 5 to 6 minutes in our panel discussion, so maybe we can take one Q&A from our listeners today. So let me just. So the first question is, how do we help young people speak up when they are being targeted online. I know a bit of that was, covered in the previous question as well, especially in communities where mental health stigma is high. And maybe we can start with Ashna this time.
I think just fostering spaces where they feel safe to speak up. I would say in a school context, it's, being proactive and talking about experience like cyberbullying and cyber violence and what that looks like, and just to not like demean their experiences and not minimize what they're going through. So I think just it being front and center, not it being something passive that is brought up after the fact of a young person experiencing it. I also think like specifically in a school context, with a lot of the policies that have come up around like personal devices, even if a student is bullied outside of school grounds, it is still a school issue. So it will still be like escalated to the principal, and the student could get suspended. So understanding that there are repercussions and making it clear what those are.
Ryan?
I would echo all of that. When it comes to even cyberbullying, which can happen, of course, off school property. School climate is one of the strongest predictors of cyberbullying. School climate, schools that have more negative climates have more cyberbullying. So it requires advanced work to build cultures and communities where these things won't be tolerated. For parents, build those lines of communication with your kids. Make sure they can come to you with these difficult things, and that they know that they won't be dismissed. So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of advanced planning, and it's a process.
Shannon?
Definitely everything that you've said would have been my first thoughts, sort of as an afterthought. And it's something that I hear from my daughter and a lot of teens is maybe they don't feel comfortable coming to you, at least so they know there's some resources that they can block, that they can make sure their accounts are closed, that they can watch what photos are being shared of them. Create that awareness. And I tell my daughter and her friends that once you post that photo or that status online, it's there forever. So if somebody decides to begin to cyberbully or attack you over that, be able to recognize that I can block them as a first step. And hopefully that will be that deterrent. Like if I'm not comfortable coming and tell my mom and I don't feel it's anything, there's a block there, there's a report there. There's steps that they can sort of take that might mitigate it, besides coming to tell somebody. So it's making sure that they know that they don't have to put up with that bullying. They essentially do have some options of cutting the snake off, the head off the snake sort of thing, that way to step back.
Okay. Thank you for that. And with this, unfortunately, we come to the end of today's panel discussion. This certainly increased our understanding about, the current terrain of cyberbullying a lot. What are some of the solutions around, collaborations, and what are some of the stigmas around cyberbullying? So I'm really glad we had this conversation, and thank you to everybody who joined us today. And if we can depart on a unique central message, I think that would be, cyberbullying is not a youth issue. It's a public issue. It's an issue which is around the ethical challenges and the policy issues as well. And the solution might not come from us individuals. It might come from a collaboration of the community, of schools, educational institutes, and the tech platforms as well. So I think the message here is, if you're a policymaker, listen. If you're an educator, use your education and your platform to educate people. If you're a digital platform, have your designs build around safety rather than engagement. And again, if you're a victim, I know it's really difficult, but speak out, reach out to anybody with whom you can reach out. And with this, like I said, we come to the end of today's panel discussion, and I'm really glad we had this conversation. So, on behalf of the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity, thank you for everybody who joined us today, and thank you, to the panelists as well who added the value to our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.